My name is Hannah. I'm 27 years old. 2 months away from graduating nursing school, I drove 7 hours with gifts in the trunk, ready for laughter and lights. Instead, I opened the door to silence, darkness, and Grandpa George eating cold turkey straight from a container. On the fridge, a hastily scribbled note: spent your $15,000 loan on a family Colorado skiing trip. Take care of Grandpa. Back in 4 days. Love you. Grandpa looked up and said calmly, "We'll fix this." I just nodded. For days later, they were begging for help. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever been stabbed in the back by your own family. I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. My father, Rick, was an insurance agent who often described himself as having temporary problems. Those problems seemed permanent to me: overdue bills, bad investments, unpaid debts. He was the kind of man who could smile in front of strangers and convince them of anything, but at home, his charm wore thin when rent was late or the electricity bill stacked up on the kitchen counter. My mother, Sharon, worked as a cashier at a department store. She liked nice things: perfume, jewelry, shoes she couldn't afford. Whenever Dad failed to deliver, she tried to fill the emptiness with trinkets and sales, proudly showing off a necklace while ignoring the fact that groceries had to be bought on credit. I remember once she bought a sequined clutch bag, and when I asked if we had enough money for my school trip, she brushed me off, saying, "Don't worry, Hannah, things always work themselves out." But they never really did. I was the middle child, squeezed between Mason and Lily. My brother Mason, 2 years older, was clever, loud, and reckless. He always knew how to get what he wanted, and usually at my expense. I'll never forget the day he took my laptop, the one I had saved up for by babysitting 3 nights a week. He promised he'd pay me back soon because he was going to use it to win big on a fantasy league. The laptop came back 2 months later, cracked on the corner and full of viruses. Mason shrugged like it wasn't his fault. "It was just a loan, Hannah," he said, as though my trust was a bank he could rob whenever he pleased. My sister Lily was younger than me by 3 years, with big eyes and a sweet smile that fooled everyone. She had a talent for acting helpless to get what she wanted. When she was 16, she begged to borrow my credit card for a few school supplies. A week later, I discovered my balance maxed out at $700. Lipsticks, foundations, and skincare products filled her dresser drawers. When I confronted her, she just tossed her hair and said, "Relax, you'll pay it off eventually. You're the responsible one." And that was always my role. The girl who studied, who cleaned up, who tried not to cause trouble. The only person who saw me differently was Grandpa George. After Grandma passed away, he moved into our house. At first, I worried he would be another mouth to feed, another person demanding attention. But he was the opposite. He had lived a tough life, a Korean War veteran who later worked 30 years at the post office. He was quiet, steady, and had a way of cutting through chaos with just a few words. I used to sit with him on the porch during sticky Oklahoma summers, watching the neighborhood kids ride bikes. He would light his old pipe, though he rarely smoked, and say things like, "Money isn't about numbers, Hannah. It's about respect. Respect for yourself and for the effort it takes to earn it." He taught me rules no one else in my family cared about: save before you spend, never waste food, and most importantly, never lend money to those who don't respect your work. At the time, I didn't fully understand. But now, looking back, I realize he was trying to protect me from the very people I loved most. My parents, brother, and sister all leaned on me in different ways. When Dad had a temporary problem, I'd quietly give up money from my part-time jobs to help. When Mom needed someone to listen after her shopping binges caused another fight, I sat with her on the couch, nodding, even though I wanted to scream. When Mason begged for favors, I said yes, hoping he'd finally learn gratitude. When Lily cried about needing to fit in at school, I handed over my last $20. But Grandpa never let me feel like I was invisible. He showed up at my high school graduation with a bouquet of wildflowers he picked himself, whispering, "I'm proud of you, kiddo. Don't let anyone steal that from you." He was the only one who looked at me and saw more than a doormat. Still, Growing up in that family left scars. I learned to measure my words carefully, because whenever I complained, I was accused of being selfish or dramatic. Mason once told me, "You're too uptight, Hannah. You should be more like me, easygoing." Lily liked to laugh that I was born old because I worried about things like bills and deadlines. Even my mother scolded me for acting superior whenever I resisted lending out my money. Inside, I carried anger I never let out. I wanted to scream when Mason crashed my car and handed it back smelling of beer. I wanted to cry when Lily borrowed my clothes and returned them stained. I wanted to shake my parents for pretending everything was fine while Grandpa quietly sold off tools and trinkets just to keep groceries on the table. But I swallowed it all. Because in that house, if you caused conflict, you became the problem. And I couldn't afford to be the problem. So I studied and dreamed of leaving Tulsa. Nursing became my ticket out, a profession my family underestimated, but one that gave me a real purpose. That cold December night, I pulled my phone from my coat pocket with that slow, sinking dread you get before opening an email you already know is bad news. The banking app spun, the little wheel churning like it was mocking me, and then my balance appeared, $23.17. Beneath it, the transaction history glared back. $14,942, Aspen Snow Tours. I stared so hard my eyes watered, as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into something sensible if I just focused enough. But they didn't. At first my brain tried to make it benign. A glitch. A duplicate charge. Some stranger's mistake that would be reversed with 2 polite phone calls. But then I saw the posted date, today, and the status, completed. I felt the heat rise in my face, and then, like someone flipped a switch, every bit of warmth left my body. I could hear the refrigerator humming and Grandpa's fork scraping the bottom of the plastic container, small, homey sounds that suddenly felt obscene against the size of what I was seeing. I dialed my father. Straight to voicemail. My mother. It rang twice, then cut. Mason's phone, can't talk, powder day, flashed on the screen before the call dropped. Lily's text bubble popped up for a second and disappeared, then my call went unanswered. I opened Instagram without thinking, like a reflex, and there it was at the top of my feed, my family, bundled up in rented jackets and bright helmets, grinning against a white blur of mountains. My mother's caption burned into my eyes, "The best Christmas ever." There were glitter emojis. Mason had tagged the resort. Lily had added a heart. Dad had commented something about family time being priceless. I could feel the kitchen light seemed too bright, the laminate table too slick under my palm. Because these money wasn't just money. It was the clinical placement fee due in 8 days, the updated liability insurance, the immunization titers I had to pull and pay for again, the state board application, the NCLEX registration, the background check renewal. Gas back and forth to the hospital during preceptorship, new white shoes after mine split last month. It was the last stretch of the life I have been building since I left Tulsa, the math of it, the calendar, the way everything had finally started to add up. Without that money, the hospital could drop my internship. Without the internship, my graduation date would push. Without graduation, there would be no board application, no license number, no job offer waiting for me in Austin. Everything cascaded in my head like stacked plates sliding off a shelf. I saw emails I would have to write with my heart in my throat, and the polite, regretful responses I would get back. I saw the rent due on the 1st, the credit card payment I had timed perfectly, the way one late fee would breed another until the whole thing was a knot I couldn't untie. My hands shook so badly I put the phone flat on the table and pressed my palms on either side of it like I was bracing a patient about to seize. Grandpa didn't speak right away. He took a slow sip of water, set the cup exactly on the ring it had left, and watched me breathe. I counted 4 in, 6 out, the way they taught us to talk patients down from panic. It didn't work. My chest felt tight, my eyes were burning, and I could taste the metallic edge of fear in the back of my throat. I opened the app again, hoping for some miracle correction, but the line item sat there, neat and final. I clicked through other accounts. The loan disbursement I'd earmarked across checking and savings had been siphoned clean. The overdraft protection was already engaged for the pending pharmacy charge from yesterday. I hadn't been sloppy. I had been careful, but they had been shameless. I called again. The call connected to Mason for half a second to wind and laughter, and then cut off with a barked "Bro, don't" before the beep. Lily finally texted, "Can't talk right now." On the lift. "We'll call later," and a snowflake emoji like this was all a joke. I checked my email. Nothing from school yet. It was the holiday. Offices closed, but my last reminder sat there like a threat. Clinical fee due by January 2nd, 5 p.m. Failure to pay will result in removal from placement and delayed graduation. I did the math again. 8 days. 8 days and Christmas in the middle, where banks move like they're underwater. 8 days for an impossible fix with an account that read $23.17 in a city where you can't even get a tank of gas for that. I sank into the chair so hard it squeaked, and finally the tears came in a rush, hot and embarrassing. I hated crying in front of anyone, even Grandpa, but the sound that came out of me wasn't dainty or controlled. I thought about calling the hospital educator, about leaving some pathetic voicemail I'd replay in my head for months. I thought about driving back to Houston in the dark and pawning anything that wasn't bolted down. Then I looked at Grandpa, at his steady hands, and the way he sat up straighter when he knew I was watching him. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't pretending it was fine either. He just looked at me calmly. "I can't pay it," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "I can't pay any of it now. If I miss this deadline." My phone lit up with another photo from their story, a boomerang of champagne flutes clinking in a hot tub, snow swirling prettily in the background. "Family first," my mother had captioned it. I almost laughed. It came out like a cough. Grandpa set down his fork, folded his hands on the table, and finally spoke, his voice so even it steadied my heartbeat. "Now they've hurt not only you, but my pride as well. We'll fix this." We sat there long after the sun slipped behind the bare pecan tree in the yard, the kitchen lamp turning the room the color of weak tea. Grandpa rinsed the turkey container, set it upside down to dry, and put the kettle on like a referee calling time before the next round. My phone lay face down between us, as if even the screen was ashamed of what it had shown. "Start at the beginning," he said gently. "Not tonight. The first time." The question lodged in my throat because the first time wasn't big or cinematic. It was small, easy to excuse. I was 16, working weekends at Brahms, a shoebox of cash tucked behind the winter scarves in my closet. Dad claimed the Honda needed urgent car repairs. He was so earnest about it I handed over the envelope without counting. A week later, he swirled a new phone in his palm at dinner, a sleek black slab with a fancy camera. "Upgrade for the office," he said, grinning at Mason. "Gotta keep up." When I asked about the car, he winked. Blessing upon blessing. Mechanic found a cheaper fix. The Honda kept coughing in the mornings. My savings never returned. Grandpa slid a yellow pad across the table. "Write it down," he said. "Dates if you remember. So you never again let time make a liar out of your memory." My mother's turn sat like a rock in my stomach. Senior year, I won a local scholarship, $2,000, paper certificate, handshake photo, me in a stiff blazer I borrowed from the counselor. We took a picture by the mailbox when the check came. A week later it was gone. "We had to help with some debts," Mom said quietly, patting my hand as if comfort could make math change. "We'll pay it back before tuition's due." A month later I saw a velvet box in her dresser, a delicate gold chain with a tiny diamond drop. It was on sale, she chirped when I stared. "You wouldn't believe the discount." I believed the price tag more than I believed her promise. That fall I filled out a payment plan and picked up more shifts. Grandpa poured tea. "You asked for it then," he said. "I did," I admitted. She cried. Said I was making her feel like a thief. I hugged her and told her it was okay. The memory burned. It wasn't. Next came Mason. He needed my car for a job interview across town. He returned it 3 days later with the back bumper duct taped and the taillights spidered with cracks. "It was just a fender bender," he said, sliding my keys across the table like we were trading cards. "Insurance will sort it out." Insurance didn't. He'd put the accident under my policy, filed nothing, and vanished when the premium spiked. I took the bus to clinicals for 2 months, counting quarters like prayers. I wrote that one down too, carefully, the way we chart in the hospital. Objective, spare, undeniable. Lily's memory came wrapped in glitter and cheap perfume. She was 19, desperate to feel older, to feel anywhere but where she was. My passport sat in my desk because I liked the idea of leaving, even if I couldn't afford it. One Saturday, I went to find it for a clinical ID check, and the drawer felt lighter, the way air feels wrong just before a storm. Lily laughed when I confronted her. Relax. It was just for one night. They barely glanced at it. She waved off my panic as if the border between honesty and fraud were a decorative line on a menu. 2 weeks later, a bouncer cut it in half and handed me the pieces, his face bored. Don't loan important things to children, he said. I didn't bother to explain that I was the child who'd been raising everyone. Grandpa's eyes softened. He nudged the pad again. I wrote it down with a shaking pen. The house felt too quiet, as if the drywall was listening. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked and then was hushed. Grandpa took a breath like a man setting down a load. Now me, he said, and I saw the effort it cost him to square his shoulders. He told me about his pension disappearing more than once. Small withdrawals first, to cover something just this month signed with careful penmanship not his own. He'd noticed when the balance didn't match his records. I let it go, he said. I wanted to believe they'd made a mistake. The word they hovered like a gnat. He wouldn't name names, but the hurt named itself. Then the watch. Grandma's gold watch, the one she wore to church and anniversaries, engraved on the back, to Ruth, with all my hours, G. After she died, he kept it on his dresser, winding it every Sunday out of habit. One day it was gone. For medical treatment, they'd said. Something urgent that can't wait. No appointments followed. No bills came. The wrist felt naked for months. He just pretended he'd misplaced it. I reached across the table, covered his hand with mine. The skin was papery, but his grip was strong. I should have seen it sooner, he said quietly. I taught you to save. I should have taught them to stop. You tried, I said. I watched you. We both knew it wasn't enough. We kept talking. Little things bloomed into a map of the same road. Borrowed, cash jars that reappeared empty. Utilities put in my name, to build your credit, then paid late, then not at all. The pattern didn't even bother to disguise itself. It simply relied on our shame not to point at it. By the time the tea went cold, I looked at the list we'd made, the grim ledger of all the small thefts that trained us to accept the big one. Grandpa tore it neatly along the perforation, folded it twice, and slid it into an envelope. We keep this, he said. For one interesting case. Grandpa wiped his hands on a dish towel, then did something I did not expect. He pulled a scuffed gray laptop from the sideboard, flipped it open, and squinted as the screen lit his face pale blue. You think I'm old and don't understand anything? He said, mouth twitching. I've been taking computer classes for a year now. I have a plan. Then he tapped with 2 deliberate fingers, opened a notes app titled Contingencies, and turned the screen so I could see a neat little checklist waiting for names and dates. The titles were simple, military even. First, he said, we harden the perimeter. Change the locks and alarm code. Not in a week, not later, now. He pulled a magnet off the fridge, the one shaped like a tractor, and revealed a business card from a local locksmith he trusts. He did the VA clinic doors, Grandpa said. Discreet and fast. I called, voice steadier than my hands, and explained we needed a same-night rekey and a fresh keypad. The dispatcher didn't blink. Holiday surcharge, 2-hour window. I said yes before she finished quoting the price. While we waited, Grandpa slid the alarm manual toward me like a test I could actually pass. We changed the master PIN, the duress code, and every temporary access code that had ever been handed out, just for the week. We deleted Dad's old code, Mason's, Lily's, even Mom's emergency one. Second, Grandpa said, tapping the cursor into the next line, we secure the record. Bank statements, photos of the empty house, the note. I took out my phone and started with the obvious. Screenshots of the Aspen Snow Tour's charge, full account number cropped, booking ID visible, date and time captured. I exported the month statement as a PDF and sent it to a brand new email we created on the spot. Grandpa dictated the password. I memorized it twice. We printed copies on his old inkjet, the kind that grumbles before it coughs out each page. He labeled folders with my name and today's date, then added a second set labeled "Do Not Remove" and slipped it into a fireproof pouch. The house itself had to be documented. We walked room to room, our shadows long in the hall. I photographed the dark living room, the still pile of wrapped gifts, the cold stove with a single saucepan abandoned. I zoomed in on the fridge note, "We'll be back in a week. Take care of Grandpa. Love you," and captured the magnet and the fingerprints smudged in the margin. I stood in the front doorway and filmed a slow pan of the silent street to prove the cars weren't there. Timestamps active, location services on. Grandpa narrating softly in the background. Home is unoccupied by the signatories. Granddaughter present with homeowner. We uploaded everything to the new email and a cloud drive, then copied it onto a thumb drive he pulled, triumphantly, from a coffee can of spare screws. Redundancy, he said, pleased. Learned that in '53 and never forgot. The locksmith arrived in a white van that looked like it had seen several wars of its own. He worked while Grandpa made small talk about deadbolts and strike plates. We chose a keypad deadbolt for the front and mechanical for the side door, just in case the batteries failed. I kept thinking about keys as promises, how easily some doors had been opened for everyone but me. When the new hardware clicked into place, the sound landed like punctuation. We stood on the porch and practiced the new code until our fingers knew it without looking. I took the old brass keys, still warm from my palm, and dropped them into a Ziploc. Back at the table, Grandpa clicked into the next line on his checklist. Prepare a money-back agreement through Sam. Who's Sam? I asked. Army buddy, Grandpa said. Turned lawyer. Straight as a yardstick and twice as stubborn. He scrolled to a desired contact and hit call. It was late, but Sam answered on the second ring like men do when they owe their lives to each other. Grandpa gave him the short version. I heard the word misappropriation float through the speaker, then family, not strangers, then we're preserving the chain. Sam asked for the documents, the screenshots, and our proposed terms. Put it in writing tonight, he said, so tomorrow is execution, not invention. We drafted a repayment agreement right there, language pulled from a template Sam emailed as we spoke. Principal, $14,942. Interest, 5% annual, not punitive, just principled. Payment schedule. First installment within 72 hours of presentation, then monthly payments on the first, full amortization within 12 months. Default clause, 10-day cure, then civil action initiated. Failure to initiate repayment equals authorization to file a police report for unauthorized use of funds, attaching the note and evidence packet. Sam added 2 smart lines. No contact outside designated windows, keep the harassment at bay, and all communication recorded via email thread. No, he said, she said. He would attend as counsel of record, not just a friend. Reading his email, the knot in my chest loosened. Fourth, Grandpa said softly, we patch your cash flow. He looked almost sheepish, reaching for the tin where he keeps the tax receipts. Underneath was a rubber-banded stack, bills faced, edges aligned. He set $5,000 on the table and didn't let go. From my stash, he said. But only with a receipt and interest. We respect each other's work in this house. I wanted to refuse. Pride rose hot in my throat. But then I thought of the hospital deadline and the way panic had eaten my lungs. What interest? I asked, wiping at my face, trying to sound like a person who negotiates and not a girl who begs. Same 5%, he said. You pay me on the 15th so I can practice what I preach. We signed 2 copies. If I drop dead, you still owe my memory. He smiled, but his eyes stayed serious. He counted the money out loud and slid it across the table, and I felt something unclench that had been tight since I first saw the charge. I earmarked it, line by line, for the clinical fee, the board registration, the shoes, and the gas. Then he moved to the last line of the checklist and looked at me over his glasses. Gather witnesses, veteran friends, to stand by me if they start to pressure me. Presence changes behavior, he said. Bullies talk softer when there's an audience, even a polite one. He started making calls, short and coded. Ortiz, Navy, now runs a garage. Leona, former Army nurse who could stare down a colonel and make him apologize. Big Mike, Marine, 6'4", heart like a hymnal. Mr. Ellis, quiet artilleryman turned deacon, voice like Sunday morning. Each one said yes before Grandpa finished the sentence. We set the plan. They would sit in pairs at separate tables in the cafe, no uniforms, just eyes and calm. Ortiz would park his truck where it could see the door. Big Mike would keep his hands visible, his smile soft. Mr. Ellis would bring a pocket notepad and write what he heard. Observers, Grandpa said. Not enforcers. We rehearsed the choreography like a drill. Arrive 10 minutes early, choose a table with clear sight lines, sit with my back to the wall, place the packet on the table, phone set to voice memo, Sam on my right, Grandpa on my left. If they raised their voices, we would pause and restate the purpose. If they demanded privacy, we would decline. If they threatened, we would stand, gather our papers, and walk toward the officer Grandpa knew. He had already called to confirm a patrol car could meet us nearby for a civil standby, a phrase that sounded like a blessing. I set the doorbell camera to save clips to the cloud and tested the motion alerts on the driveway. We moved Grandpa's important papers into a locked file box and slid it under his bed. I updated my own passwords, email, banking, school portal. New answers to security questions no one but me could guess. It was past midnight when the locksmith finished. The front lock turned smooth and new, catching in a way that felt reassuring. Grandpa wrote a check, shook the man's hand, and saw him to the door. We stood in the entryway for a moment, listening to the unfamiliar click of safety. We cleaned the mugs, turned off the kitchen light, and stood for a moment in the dark, letting our eyes adjust. A week later, just as the kettle began its thin whistle, the doorbell chimed with that cheerful digital melody I'd chosen on purpose, something bright, something unafraid. The video panel lit up. On the porch stood my parents and my two siblings, tanned and windburned, duty-free bags dangling from their wrists like trophies. Their jackets were the kind you rent for a week and pose in forever. Lift tickets still clung to zippers. I could almost smell the cinnamon from the airport pretzels stand on their scarves. They looked straight into the camera, expecting the door to swing wide as always. Instead, the red ring around the lens glowed steady, recording. The locks were already new. The keypad blinked a patient blue that meant you don't live here anymore unless I say so. I clicked the intercom and heard my own voice go low and level, like someone else had borrowed it. We'll talk when we discuss my money. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Dad lunged at the handle out of habit, and it refused him with a firm, mechanical thunk. His face did a quick dance from confusion to outrage. "This is our house," he shouted, his breath fogging the glass. Mom stepped into frame, chest heaving, mascara a shade too dark for her fresh tan. It was a family decision, she cried, as if volume could turn theft into a group hug. Behind them, Mason rolled his shoulders like he'd been inconvenienced by gravity itself. "It's just a loan," he grumbled, eyes flicking everywhere but the lens, the duty-free bag in his hand flashing a logo for a liquor I couldn't pronounce. Lily stayed slightly behind, tugging at a loose thread on her beanie, gaze pinned to the porch boards as if she could fall through and disappear. When she finally glanced up, her eyes found the camera and then flinched away. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I let the hallway stay quiet, the way silence sometimes does more than a sermon. Grandpa was already at the entry, shoulders square, chin set in that gentle, immovable line I'd come to trust. He nodded once at me. I opened the side door, not the front, and the winter air swept in with a stern chill. Boots crunched on the walkway. Mom turned at the sound. That was when the unexpected element stepped into view. Officer Daniels, in uniform, calm as a January pond. He wasn't there to scare them. He was there to mark the moment. A civil standby, he'd called it when Grandpa phoned earlier, a presence to keep the temperature from boiling. Daniels had been one of Grandpa's volunteers at the VA, and he greeted him now with an easy, respectful tilt of the head that said, "We've done harder things than this, friend." "The official statement is ready," Grandpa said, his voice carrying clearly through the intercom and out the side door both, so there could be no misunderstanding. He didn't raise it. He didn't need to. If you want to talk calmly, let's go to a cafe. If not, then we'll go to the police station. Dad barked a humorless laugh. You called the police on your own family? Daniels didn't flinch. He stood with his hands visible, posture neutral, eyes taking in the porch, the bags, the way my father's jaw ground left, right, left. No one's in trouble yet, he said, matter of fact. I'm here as a courtesy while folks sort out a financial dispute. We can do that at a public place like the cafe down the block, or we can do it with a report number at the station. Your choice. Mom's mouth trembled. This is ridiculous. Hannah, open this door. We're freezing. I could see our reflections layered in the glass. Their bright parkas, my sweatshirt sleeve, Grandpa's steady profile, the small red ring that kept recording. New locks? Mason said, half to himself, half as a provocation. Seriously? He lifted the handle again, as if stubbornness could pick a deadbolt. Seriously, I said. I kept my hands at my sides so they wouldn't see them shake. We meet at Java and June in 30 minutes. You'll receive a repayment agreement and a printout of the charge. If you choose not to meet, Officer Daniels will accept my statement and evidence, and we will proceed formally. Dad planted his feet. You don't dictate terms to your parents. Grandpa pressed the interior door open another inch, enough for his breath to fog in the cold. Son, he said quietly, and the word landed heavier than any shout. You've burned the map that brought you here. Now you'll use ours. Lily shifted, eyes shiny, and I felt a tug I didn't let win. The porch light turned her into a portrait of someone who wanted to be good at honesty, but had never been taught the steps. Mom squeezed her arm, misreading the meaning. Daniels kept his tone even. Ma'am, sir, this is a civil matter. I'm here so nobody raises their hand or their voice. Best next move is public seating, coffee on the table, pens in hand. Otherwise, like the gentleman said, we go downtown. Dad straightened, working to reassemble his authority like a suit he'd left crumpled in a gym bag. Fine, he said finally, with a sharp little nod that pretended victory. We'll humor this. It was always humor to you, I said, more to myself than to him. That's the problem. He didn't hear me or pretended not to. He gathered the bags, handed one to Mom, and started toward the driveway. Mason muttered something about drama queens. Lily lingered half a breath, then followed, tugging her beanie lower. The camera caught the quick glance she threw at the lens, apology, fear, habit, and saved it to the cloud where I couldn't edit it into something softer. When they were off the porch, I opened the front door just enough for Daniels and Grandpa to step inside. The officer's eyes did a slow, professional sweep of the entry, new deadbolt gleaming, no signs of forced entry, a neat stack of papers clipped on the console table. He nodded toward the documents without touching them. That your packet? Yes, sir, I said. My voice, to my surprise, was steady. Statement, screenshots, photos of the note, copies for each of them. Good, he said. Keep the originals with you until signatures are on paper. Phone charged. 89%. Start a voice memo the minute you sit down. Perfectly lawful in a one-party state. He tipped his head toward Grandpa. George, you riding with her? Of course, Grandpa said, like the answer had always been carved in stone. I thanked Daniels and closed the door. The new lock turned with a decisive click that sounded like a verdict. For a moment we stood in the quiet entry, listening to the house breathe. I could feel my heart in my teeth, but underneath it a calmer rhythm had begun, like the metronome you only notice after the music stops. Grandpa touched the brim of an imaginary cap. Coffee, then clarity, he said. No speeches, no scenes. Just the paper. Outside, tires crunched on the cold street as the car pulled away. I watched their taillights fade on the camera screen until only our own porch light was left, steady, unblinking, waiting. The bell over the cafe door jangled with a polite little apology as we walked in, the kind of sound meant to soften whatever came next. Java and June was warm and bright, a chalkboard menu listing syrups with names that sounded like promises. Grandpa chose a corner table with his back to the wall. Sam arrived seconds later, lean and unhurried, a canvas briefcase over his shoulder. He shook Grandpa's hand like they were still in uniform and set the briefcase down with the care of a surgeon placing an instrument tray. Across the room, I clocked our witnesses exactly where we'd planned them. Ortiz by the window pretending to read the sports page, Leona stirring tea with a tiny metal spoon, Big Mike at a two-top that made him look like a giant visiting dollhouse country. Mr. Ellis writing in his pocket notebook with the patience of Sunday school. No one stared at us. Their presence smoothed the air. My parents and siblings swept in 10 minutes late, bringing the sharp smell of cold air and duty-free liquor. Dad scanned for the biggest stage and found it in us. Mom's eyes were glossy, her scarf perfect. Mason slouched, phone half hidden in his palm, thumbs twitching. Lily trailed, small and hunched at the edges, as if the light might scold her. Sam rose just enough to nod. "Afternoon," he said. "Thank you for meeting us." Dad did not sit until he had delivered his opening statement into the room. "We deserve a vacation," he insisted, as if volume could hammer a bad idea into a better one. I felt the words ping off my ribs. Sam didn't flinch. He slid 3 folders from his briefcase and aligned them with the edge of the table, a ritual of order. "We're here about a single, documented transaction," he said evenly. $14,942 taken from Hannah's account, used for a trip. "This is not about whether skiing is a noble pursuit. It's about repayment." Mom folded into her chair at last, tugging off gloves finger by finger like she was undressing grief. "We'll pay it all back someday," she pleaded, voice already rising into the first note of an old song. "Someday," I repeated quietly, because the word had a taste I knew too well. "Later, never. Please be patient while we take more." Mason leaned back, spread his knees, let the accusations slip out lazy and practiced. "You only ever think about yourself." I felt Grandpa's knee bump mine under the table, the gentlest anchor. Sam held up a hand the way traffic cops do when they're saving you from your own momentum. He opened the first folder. Inside, printed and tabbed, was the life I had felt collapsing, now stapled, dated, labeled like it deserved to exist. He laid out the papers. A receipt from Aspen Snow Tours with their booking number, the screenshot of my bank statement, the payment schedule we'd drafted, the single-page explainer on interest rates and terms and conditions, even the paragraph on criminal liability if repayment failed. He placed a blue pen at each plate like silverware. "This is straightforward," Sam said. "Principal, $14,942. Interest, 5% annually, simple, not compounding. First payment due within 72 hours of signing. Remaining balance amortized over 12 months with payments due the first of each month. Joint and several liability. That means each of you is responsible for the whole, not some imaginary slice. Miss a deadline, you have 10 days to cure. Fail that, we proceed with a civil action and, if necessary, a criminal complaint for unauthorized use of funds. All communications will be by email. All payments by traceable instrument. No cash, no handshakes, no trust us." Dad snorted. "You're going to see your own father?" Sam didn't blink. "If needed," he said. "Or we can all behave like adults and sign now." Mom's voice wobbled into the high register where she usually wins. "Richard, she's just making a scene." "Nobody's making anything," Grandpa said quietly. "We're ending one." The cafe hissed and hummed. Milk steamed. Cups clinked. Mr. Ellis wrote something down. Leona's spoon tapped porcelain, small, steady percussion. I kept breathing in 4s, out in 6s, the way we're taught to ride out panic without making it our god. Dad jabbed a finger at the papers. "This is insulting." "This is clarity," Sam replied. "Which can feel like insult." Mason leaned forward, finally putting his phone face down. "You set us up," he said to me, eyes bright with the thrill of being wronged. "You changed the locks, you called the cops, and now you want interest like we're strangers." "Over what?" "A loan you should have offered if you had any family feeling." The laugh that rose in my throat surprised me with how tired it sounded. I kept it small. "A loan is a thing you ask for," I said. "Not a thing you take." Lily had been twisting her napkin into a damp rope. She suddenly dropped it, both hands flat on the table, and her voice split the room cleanly. "Stop lying. We knew we were taking her money. I warned you, but you did it anyway." Chairs stilled. Even the espresso machine paused like it needed a breath. My mother's mouth opened and closed, a fish on air. Dad froze. Mason's bravado flickered. Lily stared straight at Dad, words tumbling now that the seal was broken. At the airport when the card declined for the upgrade? You said, try Hannah's. Mom said Hannah would understand. Mason said she'd thank us when she saw the photos. You all knew. Don't pretend you didn't. Silence hung over the table. It wasn't the ugly silence from our kitchen a week ago. Sam nodded once, as if a puzzle piece had slid exactly where it belonged. Thank you, Lily, he said, turning to the others before she could be punished for telling the truth. Intent clarified. Back to business. He pointed to the signature lines. So, all of you. Initial each page. We'll exchange copies. Dad's face hardened into something brittle. Or what, he said. Sam glanced toward the window where Ortiz turned a page deliberately and then back at us. Or we walk 2 blocks to the station, he said, voice still quiet, which somehow made it louder. Hannah has a prepared statement and evidence packet. A patrol car is already aware there may be a report this afternoon. There is a camera on their porch that captured your arrival. We will attach that if needed. None of this is a threat. It is simply the next logical step if we can't agree to the first one. Mom's eyes filled, and for a second I saw the girl she must have been, trying to solve feelings with shiny things. We don't have it, she whispered. Not all at once. No one asked for all at once, Sam said. We asked for a schedule and respect. Grandpa slid a copy of the agreement toward Dad with the gentleness of an altar rail. It's not a punishment, he said. It's a repair for you. Mason pushed back from the table, stood up, sat down again. The part of him that loves a fight looked for a bell that never rang. Lily kept her eyes on the blue pen like it might jump if she didn't. Dad looked at me for the first time like I was a person and not a resource. You're really going to make me sign this? You made me draft it, I said, and was surprised to hear no anger there, only the clear truth. Sign it, and we drink our coffee like ordinary people. Sam added a final page from his briefcase, a 1-paragraph addendum titled Acknowledgement of Unauthorized Use. He read it aloud, not as theater, but so no one could pretend later that the words had been small. We, the undersigned, acknowledge that funds belonging solely to Hannah were used without her permission for personal travel. We agree to the attached repayment plan and understand that failure to comply may result in civil and criminal consequences. Dad's jaw worked. Mom stared at the table. Mason scratched a phantom itch on his wrist. Lily looked nauseous. Across the cafe, the bell rang as someone else came in, laughed, ordered something sweet. Life went on, the way it does when your personal earthquake doesn't shake the whole block. Dad reached for the pen first, not out of contrition, but out of habit, the same habit that made him take keys and envelopes and yes. He signed with a heavy hand, the ink soaking deeper where he pressed too hard. Mom signed next, her cursive looping like apology. Mason scrawled something that barely looked like a name. Lily paused, then wrote carefully as if neatness could be its own offering. Sam collected the stack, counted signatures like a dealer who refuses to be cheated, and clipped them into 2 piles, one for them, one for us. He dated everything, then slid their copy across the table and kept ours in front of me with the steadiness of a mountain. First payment, he said, tapping the schedule, due 72 hours from now. Email confirmation to the address printed there. We'll acknowledge receipt. Miss it, and we'll move to step 2 without another cafe. Dad opened his mouth, closed it. Mom dabbed at her eyes with the edge of a napkin that left white lint on her cheek. Mason hissed something about lawyer tricks under his breath. Lily sat very still, as if any motion might break what little was holding. I felt tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with a decade of unpaid invoices of the soul. But under the exhaustion there was quiet. Not triumph. Not even relief. Grandpa reached for his cup. Coffee's getting cold, he said, and somehow we all smiled a little at that, even if just to prove we could. Sam stood. We're done here, he said. If you have questions about logistics, email me. He slipped the signed originals into his briefcase and secured the latch with a click that sounded as final as any gavel. We rose. Chairs moved back. The bell over the door jangled again as the winter light reached in and touched the corners of our table, ordinary and soft, as if nothing monumental had just happened. Back home, I opened my laptop at the kitchen table, poured coffee for Grandpa, and started writing the new rules in plain language: no poetry, no wiggle words. Separate accounts for Grandpa, spending limits on the household card, temporary door codes that expire every week. I printed the page and taped it next to the fridge calendar where the Santa magnet had once held their note. First, the money. I marched Grandpa through the steps like a nurse precepting a new hire. New checking in his name only, new debit card, two-factor authentication on his phone, alerts set to ping me and him for anything over $20. We canceled the old joint card they'd treated like a communal bucket. He laughed when the bank rep called him sir 3 times in a row, but his shoulders eased when the confirmation emails arrived. His pension would land in a clean account now, not the old one with everyone's fingerprints. Second, the house. The locks were already changed. Now the alarm rules needed to match. I created temporary codes for family arrivals, a number for the cleaner, one for package drop-offs, one for maintenance, and set them to expire every Sunday at 9 p.m. No more permanent access, just in case. I showed Grandpa how to add a guest code from his phone and how to delete it with one tap. He practiced until the tiny beeps sounded like punctuation marks. When the front door opened later that afternoon, Dad walked in like a storm front, jaw set, voice already rising. He scanned the taped sheet, the pantry envelope, the sealed file box on the console table, and a flush crept up his neck. I am the head of the family, he declared, as if the sentence itself had legal force. Grandpa didn't raise his voice. He didn't even stand. He just looked at Dad like a man checking the horizon before deciding which way to drive. You are the head of chaos in your own head, he said. Now there is order here. The words didn't slam, they landed. Dad blinked, mouth open, as if a script line had gone missing. He tried another tack, pacing the rug so hard the fibers shifted. This is humiliating, he said. Locks? Codes? Envelopes? After all you've taken, I said, but softly, like a diagnosis. These aren't punishments. They're guardrails. Mom arrived behind him with puffy eyes and a wadded tissue. She glanced at the taped rules, then at me, then began crying in the practiced way that always used to melt my nose into yes. Sweetheart, you know I'm fragile, she said. Why would you turn the house into a prison? Your father can't even. This is not a prison, I answered. It's a home that finally has boundaries. Mason whistled low, hands in pockets, performing boredom like a job. Relax, Sheriff, he said. You win. What, you want me to turn in my shoelaces too? When no one laughed, he rolled his eyes. God, you people can't take a joke. A minute later, offended by the absence of applause, he grabbed his keys and left in a crunch of gravel. Only Lily moved toward the table. She read the rules twice, finger tracing each line like she was learning a new language. What can I do? She asked, voice small but steady. Start with the skis, I said. Find the listings. Check the brand, sizes, bindings. Take clear photos on a neutral background. We'll post them tonight. Her face flickered guilt, then gratitude. She fetched the gear from the garage. In the living room, we set up a little photo studio with a lamp and a bed sheet. Lily wiped each pair with a microfiber cloth, lined them toe-to-toe, and zoomed in on the model numbers. She even added measurements in the captions like a pro. Grandpa hovered with a pen, noting serials and receipt numbers on a yellow pad. I requested refunds for the unused lift tickets and rentals, leaning on the resort's policy. Turns out a paper trail reads louder than tears. By evening, we had 3 buyers lined up through a local marketplace and 1 refund in processing. The first pickup happened right after dinner. A high school coach who knew a bargain when he saw one, cash counted into my palm under the porch light. The second pair went to a college kid who'd taken the bus across town. He thanked us 3 times and waved like we'd saved his season. The third sale landed the next morning, the skis lifted into a Subaru with a dog wagging in the back seat. It wasn't dignity exactly, but it was motion. $2,000. I separated the bills the way Grandpa likes, faces up, corners squared, then slid the stack into an envelope. I deposited the cash and scheduled the clinical fee payment from Grandpa's short-term loan, the confirmation number burning like a little blue flame in my inbox. Paid, Grandpa said, tapping the laptop screen with one knuckle. On time. Dad tried twice more to swell himself into the room, voice booming about respect and roles, and how cold it felt to walk into his kitchen and be treated like a guest. Each time, Grandpa's tone cut through like a bell, then behave like one. Mom rotated through silence and sighs, checking her reflection in the dark window as if sorrow were a shade you could blend. Mason sent a text that read LOL and nothing else. Only Lily stayed, hauling boxes, sticky noting shelves, collecting stray keys into a zip bag for the retired jar. That night, I set the alarm with the new code and watched the keypad glow for a second before the house settled. Coffee grounds portioned for morning. Receipts clipped to folders. I put my school's fee receipt on the fridge where no one could miss it. Graduation day in Austin felt like stepping out from under a storm cloud I'd carried since Tulsa. The starched white gown, the pin from my instructors, the cheers when my name was called, all of it felt earned in a way no one could steal. I signed my first nursing contract a week later, a steady job with night shifts and real patients who depended on me, not on the contents of my bank account. Grandpa George moved in with me that summer. Every morning, while I rushed to tie my hair back and check my stethoscope, he made coffee and said the same thing: "You saved not only yourself, but me too." At first, I brushed it off, but over time I understood. By drawing the line, I hadn't just reclaimed my future, I had given him dignity after years of being drained by the same people who'd drained me. The repayment agreement held. At first, the family fought it tooth and nail. Dad signed the checks like he was bleeding with every stroke. Mom sighed and complained, writing notes in the margins about how unfair life was. But the balance decreased. The lawyer's calendar reminders didn't allow them to forget. Mason, forced into humility, picked up a second job at a warehouse, grumbling but showing up. For the first time, his excuses didn't cancel the debt. Lily, to my surprise, stood beside me. She sent me screenshots of payments she'd made on time and whispered encouragements when Dad tried to stir chaos again. The complaining never stopped completely. My parents turned ordinary dinners into court trials of guilt, reminding me how much they had sacrificed. But they learned something new: to ask instead of take. If Mom wanted to borrow sugar or a ride, she called first. If Dad thought about using someone else's money, he thought twice. I carried the lessons into my work. Every patient reminded me why I fought so hard to stay in school, that independence wasn't selfishness, that boundaries were survival. At night, when Grandpa snored gently in the next room, I knew the cycle had cracked. Looking back now, I understand something I could never grasp as a child. Love without responsibility is not love at all, it's parasitism. My family confused sacrifice with silence, kindness with surrender. They believed that because I loved them, I owed them everything: my savings, my future, my peace of mind. But love without respect poisons everyone it touches. Grandpa put it better than I ever could. He would sit with his coffee, watching the Austin sunrise through the blinds, and say with a quiet smile, "The best Christmas is not when you go skiing, but when you stop being someone's victim." Those words have lived in my bones ever since. You cannot save people who refuse to respect you. But you can save yourself, and sometimes, in doing so, you give others the chance to grow too. My father, my mother, even Mason, they had to face consequences for the first time. And Lily, who once followed their lead, found her own courage when she saw me stand firm. Have you ever been betrayed by those closest to you? Write your own story in the comments below. I read every one, and I know your stories matter too. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, because maybe my story will reach someone who is still afraid to draw that line.